everybody. I am so happy to be back for the last interview of the trip of the Coast to Coast journey, and we happen to have some amazing Truman Scholars here. Have each of them introduce themselves, speak a little bit about what they're doing in D.C. and sort of a lot of their work across the different disciplines.
For sure. So, hello, my name is Dwayne Martin. I'm Truman 23 out of Florida, specifically Miami. I'm also the Youth Organizing Director at Men for Choice. And we're here in D.C. For the Summit Institute, which is a part of Truman where all of us get together in D.C. to pursue different internships and live amongst each other to build community at a very critical moment or conjunction in our career path. So, yeah. Thank you for having us.
Of course. And I'll have you two introduce yourselves as well.
Sure. Hi, my name is Malhar. I'm the Truman 2023 from New York. I work in health education, and I'm right now interning at Health and Human Services, doing health policy analysis work.
My name's Carter Yost. I use pronouns like he, him, and his. I'm originally from Nebraska. I'm the Truman from Nebraska. But I've been working in Minnesota for the past 4 years doing youth voter outreach and stateside politics work in the state of Minnesota, mostly on the communications side. And currently I'm working on the communications team and the public affairs team at the Department of Transportation.
Wow. And I want to leave one special moment, if you could plug a little bit about Men for Choice as well,
Yes.
just because that's where we connected through someone named Aaron, and so if you could speak a little bit about your role in Men for Choice, and then we'll get right into it.
For sure, definitely. So again, I'm the Youth Organizing Director at Men for Choice. Men for Choice is committed to activating, educating, and mobilizing pro-choice men in the fight for reproductive freedom. So we have folks like Chris in one of our primary states that are a battleground state for this year reproductive freedom, but inherently vis-a-vis reproductive freedom being one of the primary battleground states for the concept of democracy in our country overall. So we're activating and bringing in men to step off the sidelines and into the fight for reproductive freedom in order to step into roles that are led, will be the foot soldiers for the women who lead this movement.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And
Damn, he nailed the pitch.
he
I
did.
mean, he really just like down the middle.
Yes.
Woo!
I couldn't say any better. Because of that, I'm not even gonna. Needs to be no summary. That was amazing. With that, I want to just jump straight into it. Throughout our coast to coast journey, we have been speaking to a lot of different individuals, public servants, 18 to 25-year-olds, everyday people, and one of the biggest things that we're hearing is this is the most, and this is juxtaposed with a few different things, but the biggest thing, this is the most consequential election of our time, the 2024 election, specifically with the president, but also the gubernatorial elections happening, also other local and state elections happening. What are your thoughts on all of that from the spaces that you're in?
Indeed.
I think one of the things that's important to center with that is we're at a moment now where I absolutely agree. The 2024 election is as has been said, and surely will be said again in the next 121 days. Who's counting? That this is a critical election, and not just critical. It's the most consequential election of our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. But we're all sort of in our 20s, and that is the 8 billionth time we've been told that since we've been able to vote. Every election since I've been 18 has been the most important election of my lifetime. Mm. And that's not to undersell it. That's just consistently been true, and the stakes consistently get higher and higher. But I think that having been true and that continuing to be true is also part of what has led to such apathy or disaffection, because when everything is always red alert, DEFCON 1, I mean, of course, that's going to create some stress, some anxiety, and certainly some interest in tuning out, because it's just exhausting. And so I think, for me and for other folks who are in the voter engagement space, trying to not only sell the stakes as real and consequential, but also as a moment not just for panic, but for optimism. I mean, consequential goes both ways, right? Things could be disastrous, but things could also be incredible. And it's an opportunity for young folks to not only say what they believe in, but fight for what they believe in and get the future that they think is necessary, just, and good. And so I'm really looking at it from that optimistic and eager point of view, and trying to get folks on board with that perspective as much as I can.
Yeah, I think, Carter, you need to hit the nail on the head. I think when I think of this election, I think of how it is the case that the youngest voters are the least engaged, have the lowest voter turnout in this country, and how so much of the disaffection amongst young people in America stems from that fact. Young people are paying the most for housing than they've ever had. It's hard to find good jobs, hard to support a family, raise a family, and I think that is all connected. When we as young people make our voices heard, politicians listen and they deliver. And what I'm really hopeful for in this generation, when I look on social media or I'm talking to my friends, is that there's an understanding now that our voices are powerful. We're seeing with protest movements in the past year how powerful that voice can be. And I'm really optimistic that if we make our voices strong in this cycle, that we can see some of those really disturbing things happening amongst young people really turn around.
No, definitely.
And so I think you touched on something that's very interesting, which points to the juxtaposition of this is a consequential election. However, there are a lot of individuals in the 18 to 25 range that are like, I'm not interested in voting. I want to give up on this American experiment, this democratic experiment, if you will. It's not working. And I'm curious for you all, what encouragement, or maybe not encouragement, but what do you say to that when someone is like, I don't want to engage, I don't want to vote, it's not going to do anything?
Yeah, I think you touched exactly what the issue is, which is too often it is framed as if it is encouragement, as if young people do not know that things are at stake, right? I think the reframing needs to be, we have something to lose, and this is a tool in the toolbox to building a democracy, not just the tool, right? It is one of the many opportunities that we have in order to turn individuals in our community and moving values to action. And the vote in the election cycle is one of those. But it's also like, what does it mean to create a culture of people who understand that voting is the ability to move all at once in order to make a big change, right? Because it doesn't take just one. It takes a community of individuals who are organized and focused, and also having a nuanced understanding of what they are facing to say, this is the person who represents me. And also in the next election cycles, who have those same people together to say, you did not do what you said you were going to do. Right, and that's how we create a world where we have better candidates in office, where young people can support them. That's the world where we have individuals who understand that local elections, state elections, and federal elections are all things that are worth our time, and not only worth our time, but something that we must deeply invest into. But that is not just the election cycle, right? That is every single gap year between the election cycle, where there aren't hundreds of millions of dollars being thrown into communications about a general election, but when your mother is sick and doesn't necessarily have the capacity to afford to go to the hospital, right? When you cannot afford to get an apartment in the downtown area of your own home because you, even though you're working 2 to 3 jobs, the ends just won't meet, right? Like, these are still political issues, and I think what we have to do is say, this is not encouragement, but this is to say, you know exactly what you're talking about. Now let's see all the things that we have in our toolbox in order to take action.
And if I can ask this, what are conversations like in the spaces that you all exist in around civic engagement, voter participation? What are some of the crazier things that you hear? What are some of the nicer, more hopeful things you hear, and everything in between?
I think so. Certainly, for the three of us on the couch, we're involved, I think, in you know the like, inside of you there are two wolves meme. It's that, but I think it is, there are really distinct spaces, because Malhar and I are both like working for government agencies, and like all of us are within like highly bookish intellectual circles, but then also like Dwayne and I have both done a lot of, and Malhar, I can't speak for you, but I think similarly, like a lot of on the ground, face to face, like voter engagement and youth voter engagement specifically. And certainly in that latter space, which is both more interesting and far more fun, to be on the ground and talking with folks about real stakes. In Minnesota in 22, I helped run our youth voter engagement program, both statewide and for the University of Minnesota, where I went for undergrad. And a lot of those conversations, all of which were 2 years ago, but I think echoed similar sentiments to what's happening right now, which is, man, it is exhausting, and also, but for as much as people maybe have tuned out by choice, a lot of people just haven't tuned in by choice. And I think understanding both of those experiences is really important. for every person that has said, this is so much, I don't want to deal with it, like, I'm so tired, I don't like any of the candidates, I don't care about the issues, I'm going to stop paying attention, there are also people who just have never tried to start, not even by choice, sometimes just by situation, right? That to have the capacity to pay attention to politics, like, takes a certain amount of privilege and capacity and ability. You have to have the free time, you have to have, if you're working 9 to 9, right? You're at school and then you're going to a job, or you're at school and then you're taking care of your grandparent or whatever it is. I mean, checking the news is like this brilliant luxury to have. And so I think being able to go and talk to folks, meet folks where they are, and talk to them about what are the issues that matter to you, what are the issues that are closest to home and most personal, and how is this election positioned to impact those negatively or positively. I've had far more positive conversations than I have negative conversations. Not to say I've walked away from every door or every dorm or every apartment building being like, that felt like democracy saved and we're good. But that the positive ones certainly stick with you more, because there's just something really beautiful and brilliant about young folks, especially walking away feeling like, I actually do have skin in the game, but also I'm in a position of power and influence where I actually can do something, and that my chips on the table actually can move, can move things in the direction I hope that they'll move.
And to this as well, there was something that was actually sent to me through TikTok. I thought it was absolutely funny. But I'm curious as to your gut reactions or thoughts on this. It was an individual who felt that both the Democratic and Republican presumptive presidential nominees are not good options. And so in the TikTok, it essentially said, both individuals are qualified to bring about the end of the world. That's essentially what it said. So I'm curious, after hearing that, what is your gut reaction? And I think it sort of speaks to individuals wanting to just not vote for a Democrat or a Republican and go somewhere where someone may say, you're just throwing away your vote.
Yeah, for sure. You want to take that? Or?
I can start. I think there's so many things that I would like to see change in American democracy. So many reforms that I think are sorely needed, from expanding voter access to changing how votes are counted, to changing even how we elect our politicians. I think having a discussion about that, especially as young people, is really powerful and something that I've been really excited to see. I think the reality is, in the year 2024, we really do have two choices on the ballot. And not choosing to vote is a choice in and of itself. And it is the vote for the worst of two options. What I would encourage young people to do is to research both candidates, really take a good hard look at their platforms, and vote and make your voice heard. Even if you're not excited about many of the policies, voting for the lesser of two evils is a good and the right choice to make in America today in 2024.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I was talking to my mom. Today my sister called me when Carter came in. Carter was also out recently, and she just called me. She was like, "You heard about this Project 2025 thing?
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to, like, who are you voting for?" And honestly, I have an answer, but it wasn't an answer that I felt comfortable sharing with her, knowing where we come from. So what I told her is, let's look at things plainly. Who's going to kill you first? And I think,
it's a good place to be. This is where we want to be. And this is actually
a good way to put it.
This was sort of the dream outcome for,
amazing. It's just, but I think what that gets to is more so, first of all, like, the removal of federal politics from what your day-to-day is, right? So, like, yes, the general election matters, like, crucially, but it matters more so as, like, setting the tone for what is possible in your local and state-based elections and in your home, right? I think for us in Miami, it's a lot more prevalent because we are not climate change or changing, we are climate changed, right? When I was at home, we couldn't leave. because I was trying to catch a flight to get here, and every single flight was canceled. Right, and I looked outside, and it was very much like a Bird Box. I remember Bird Box. Felt like the airport felt like a Bird Box situation, like early COVID. And I was looking around. I was like, if this was a major hurricane, none of my family would be able to leave. And who contributes to creating the capacity for us to be evacuated and not to be left as the people who will die? Right? How do we avoid another Katrina situation? Thinking about that on and layering that on top of like the ghost towns that my childhood homes are now, right? Like I go home, and usually it's, even if it's like some type of problem, usually we are able to survive and celebrate, right? There's noise in our community. We're throwing parties. We're spending time together. And I go back to the place where I was raised. I played at Gwen Cherry Park, where Antonio Brown and all them played, and I'm there, and it's quiet. Right, I'm standing on this field that's named by my coach who died in 2020, and it's quiet in my community. Yet we see the erection of new buildings, and everyone having casual conversations about moving to Georgia or Houston, not knowing where that's based. Right, so we've moved from survival to survival and waiting for what's next. And I think that's a very important nuance as we're contextualizing, what does a general election mean? It means creating the capacity to survive and create a game plan. And that rings true for me because my family, like, this is not abstract, like, this is not a game. I think actually one of your quotes from the Union of
Black Men,
yeah, and you're like, one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we have time.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
so you looked in, you did the research.
Man came in with research. Yeah.
Yes.
We do not have time, right? Yeah. And that rings even more true if we're contextualizing, even if we're facing the same issues. Climate urgency is real.
With that, if we can shift slightly to, and it'll be an abrupt shift, but a shift nonetheless, to a hot take that you have about civic engagement, voter participation, democracy, anything in that realm. If all of you could give at least one. If you have two, if you have three, I'd like to hear them all. But a hot take.
Somebody else simply has to talk first in the world.
Okay, I can start. I would say social media isn't real life. I think a lot of young people are very engaged on social media. And in many ways, it's a good way to stay in touch with friends and family. But I think we get our wires crossed in how we use that to be politically engaged. We get our news from social media more than any other generation. We spread our political views. And we think that posting memes or liking posts is a way of gaining support for a particular political movement. And the unfortunate truth is that's not true. Going to the ballot box, writing to your congressman, being touching grass, so to speak, and being in the community, that's the most powerful way of making things happen. And I think young people should really index more on that and be out there in the community, be more civically engaged.
So how, if I can ask this question with that,
Sure.
How should social media be used regarding politics, or should it not be used? And then additionally, you touched on how a lot of youth get their information from social media. I completely agree with that. Curious, as in a lot of it's not necessarily real. What do you recommend as avenues to get quality and sound information?
Yeah, so I think what sort of the experts say in terms of getting your news is get it from multiple sources and get it from places which are reputed. So local news, some national outlets, a mix of those, and I will acknowledge it's sometimes not economically feasible to subscribe to multiple newspapers, for example. But I would say if you're a student, your college almost certainly has a free subscription to a publication like the Times. You can always go to your local library. They usually have free subscriptions. But being a citizen, part of the contract you sign as a citizen of a country and a citizen of America is that you're an informed citizen. And that's something that you can't shirk away, and you can't say that I'm not, I don't want to be, or it's too hard or it's too complicated. It's fundamentally your responsibility. So that's what I would say your second question.
That will ruffle some feathers right there. It's not, it's a contract. You're an informed citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hot takes, other hot takes.
I think. Damn, I literally just had one. I did. Fleeting thought into the wind. I think one of the things that is both really important and also admittedly stressful is that as a young person, I think it's so important to understand that just because there are people that are older than you, that are more experienced than you, that have been in the sort of inside the room longer, that absolutely does not mean that they definitively will know better than you all the time. And there is no guarantee that young people can't have better solutions to the same problem that we've been dealing with for a long time. Like, don't let anybody ever get away with telling you that just because you haven't been there long enough, or you haven't been around long enough, or you know, that you're too inexperienced or too young, you're too naive to know what best might look like for you and your community. It happens all the time where you know, young candidates, young voters are told, well, no, just sort of have faith that everyone's got it figured out. And that's true some of the times. There are really, really smart people that work on incredibly hard problems. And I take a lot of confidence in knowing that there are people who are deeply and fundamentally committed to just trying to make things better for people. I actually think the majority of people that work in government are earnestly in pursuit of some kind of public good, right? Trying to secure, you know, sort of the public welfare. That said, it's not everyone. And also, there are lots of smart people, and there are lots of ways to evaluate a problem. And your experience on the ground as a young person, as a person in whatever community you might come from, is so deeply important and so deeply meaningful, and is not any less valid than someone else's. And so I think, be tenacious in if you are committed and convinced to the idea that, no, actually, you know, when it comes to climate change, or when it comes to housing, or when it comes to reproductive health care, or when it comes to XYZ bill at the city council or whatever, that you showing up and you saying, actually, this is my experience and this is what I know to sort of be true for me, for my family, for my community, that's meaningful, that's valuable. That's what politics is trying to touch, is how people interact in their day-to-day lives. And don't let that be diminished. It's not to say that we shouldn't also have some faith in research, some faith in experts. That's all deeply important. So it's not some pseudoscience argument as much as saying that don't let yourself get laughed out of the room just for the argument of inexperience or youth naivete. Yeah. I think is really important to remember that your perspective is meaningful, your perspective is still valid, and can make the difference in any number of conversations and policy decisions.
Yeah, and for sure. I think for me, it brings me to one of the key men for choice talking points, which is call bullshit. You know, we must call bullshit, and I think the only way to call bullshit is to look at the world around you with plain eyes. No one has to tell you the problems in your community because you experience them every day. You don't have to, and that is both, and for me, that's both like the geographic material world that we live in, i.e. what we see right now, but also our digital world. Like, I think in a world where we spend 6 to 8 of our waking hours on our phones, laptops, and televisions, you live there. If you are spending your time there while you are awake, you live there. Like, you know, and I think we have to recontextualize the world that we're living in to understand what we're facing, right? And understand what we're fighting for, right? When we're talking about, like, we oftentimes abstract things to, like, left, right, etc. What we're fighting for is human freedom. The ability to live a decent and fulfilling life, right? The ability to love my partner, the ability to love my family, the ability to do what I love. You're fighting for basic human things, right? And for us, it's the question of who is going against that. What is going against that, right? The issue of reproductive freedom is not just about, you know, having abortion rights. That is a key piece of it that is critical. But when we contextualize reproductive freedom, it is a privacy issue. what does privacy mean in the context of being an individual and having a right to your body in this current society we live in, right? That is having the right to your body is fundamental to living in a democracy. If you do not have that, you cannot have anything, right? The other thing is the voice. You have to have a voice. Your body and your voice are critical to you being an individual and having a democracy. If they're undermining public education, what does that mean? Right? Like these are the two policy issues that drive home the capacity for us to even think about anything else, right? So the question of what does it mean to be an informed citizen, right? You cannot be an informed citizen if you cannot even be a human.
Yeah.
You know? So I think for us, we have to think more critically. I was having a conversation with a barber recently. It was a woman in the D.C. area, and we were talking about the abortion issue. She was like, yeah, I don't really agree with abortion, this, that, and the third. And then but she was like, yeah, but I've had like afterbirth issues and things of that sort. And I was like, your afterbirth is abortion. Mm-hmm. And she was like, no, it's not abortion. It's just like I had to get cared for. And then she said, oh, that is abortion. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's like when I say think with plain eyes, it's like we know what's going on. You're facing it every day. You know what you're facing, right? But it's recontextualizing it and making it make sense and not seeing this world of abstraction and policy language and whoever is the political candidate, etc., as something separate from your everyday life, because it literally cannot be.
Wow. And with that, for being cognizant of time, I want to thank you all so much again for sitting and speaking with us, and we're really happy to spread this out. Very happy and excited that this was the last video that we did for our cross-country trip, and very thankful to be sitting with you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
you.
Thanks for having us.